Dovetail joinery has long been the gold standard of fine woodworking. If you can cut these well, you can make some impressive projects. But hand-cut dovetails can be a difficult skill to master, especially if you only do it occasionally. And most router-based dovetail jigs are expensive, they can be really difficult to set up, and the joints they produce just look machine cut. Today I'm going to show you how a simple jig made from just a few scraps of wood can help you to create beautiful dovetail joinery that actually looks like you cut it by hand. But in reality, you'll be doing most of the work with an inexpensive handheld trim router and a common straight router bit that you probably already have. Here's how it works. I've laid out the pins half of my joint with a pencil on the end grain of my workpiece. I like to vary the spacing between the pins for a more handmade look. I'm also coloring in the areas that will be cut away with the router so I don't get confused later. If this is your first dovetail joint, I have a short tutorial about how to lay one out that'll really simplify things for you. I'll put a link to that below this video. Just look in the video description, which you'll have to expand, or you'll find it pinned to the top of the comments section. Now I'm using a 1/4 inch straight bit. You can use either regular straight or spiral like I have. The depth is set to the thickness of my workpieces. The jig features a piece of grippy tape on one side. As I slip it over the end of my workpiece, that taped rabbet goes on the side that'll be facing outward when the joint is assembled. That's the show face. You want to keep that free from any potential chip out. So a scrap of wood is slipped into that tape-lined rabbet where it's secured as I tighten the wing nuts. Double check that everything is aligned to the top of your workpiece. By the way, I'll put a link below this video to a set of plans so you know how to build this simple jig. In fact, in those plans, I'm also going to include another dovetail jig that you can use on a router table. So you get 2 jigs and 1 set of plans. You can't beat that. Now all you have to do is cut away the darkened waste areas between your pins by eye. The jig keeps the router stable so it doesn't tip during the cut, and that strip of wood acts as a backer to support the fibers and prevent any chip out. I hog out most of the waste first quickly, staying away from my lines. Then I slowly creep up to the lines, removing a little bit of waste at a time. This is not difficult at all to do with a compact router that's easy to control. But if you're worried about it, you can just leave a little waste next to your pencil line and then come back with a chisel, or sometimes I even use a mill file to creep up to the lines later. And if you do go past the line, don't worry about it. You'll be cutting the other half of the joint to match whatever you end up with. So ultra accuracy is not that important at this stage. Now for the other half of the joint, you stand the pins on top of your tails board, and you have to be very careful that it doesn't move as you trace the shape of each pin with a sharp pencil. Accurate tracing is essential to a tight-fitting joint. Now, how do you cut the tails? Ideally, you do it with a bandsaw. Because while it's difficult to cut pins on a bandsaw, since the table only tilts far enough in one direction, it is really easy to cut out the tails half of the joint. You just remove the little triangles between them. If you don't have a bandsaw, you can use a scroll saw. You could even use a handheld jigsaw with a fine-tooth metal cutting blade. Just be careful that you leave your pencil lines in place, even if that means just getting close with your power tool, then trimming the rest away with the chisel. If you cut away those pencil lines, you will have gaps in your joint. A well-fitting joint should go together with a few taps. If you have to pound the heck out of this thing, you'd better get a chisel and trim it back a little bit. Forcing a joint together is a good way to split the wood. Now that is called a through dovetail, which is great for boxes and chests and casework. But drawers often feature a variation called a half-blind dovetail. You can make this joint with this jig too. I'll link to a tutorial about that process below this video as well. So you got a lot of links to check out. But first, you are definitely going to want to see this. Some folks are a pleasure to work with, like Ken Rizzo over at woodturnerswonders.com. That's where I get my turning stuff, like sanding supplies and CBN wheels for my grinder. Seriously, if you haven't seen what CBN wheels can do for you, you are missing out. I'll put a link below this video. Use it and tell Ken I sent you.